It's good to be with you this morning. Some of you I recognized from a while ago. Good to see you there, Stanley. It's our Corian counterman. Did a good job for us. Other side of the church, Sue, I see you more often. Good to see you again today. And of course, Dr. Lewis and Carol. We are happy to have worked with them for almost the day I got here. I think you got here a little before me, Dan. I was still back in St. Helena on the wrong side of the mountain. Of course, Jeff, our newest director at our hospital, one of the newest now. Jeff Nash and I go way back. But you see, we didn't realize it. When Jeff came here a few months back, he came to my office to see me and actually pulled up a chair, and we're having this nice conversation. We're about an hour or so into the conversation. And finally, I look at Jeff and I say, "Do I know you from somewhere?" And he looks at me and says, "Well, I think so." And then finally we admitted that some 5 decades ago or so, we went to college together. And I recognized him even though he had aged a little, and he looked at me and recognized that my big, bushy, curly afro was gone. Did you really recognize me after all? Anyway, it's good to be reunited with Jeff again. But I'll tell you what's really good and well in my heart today. To be here in Lake County. To be serving Clearlake. To be on a mission that to some is pretty much impossible to even visualize. But I want to share with you a little this morning about that mission and about that vision. In order to do that, I want to just say that I do not work from notes much anymore. And yet I take every opportunity to share that mission and vision from my heart seriously. Now you have to understand, back in my 20s and early 30s, I think I just calculated the other day, I must have preached 750 sermons. And they were all manuscript. I tried to memorize them as much as possible. And I want you to know that since I left the preaching circuit and went into hospital administration, I haven't preached so often. But I have had the opportunity to speak quite a bit. And what I try to do is speak from the heart. And I'm going to try to do that today. And what I mean by that is, well, on the way to church this morning, my son asked me, "So, Dad, what are you going to preach about this morning?" And I got to tell you, without missing a beat, I said, "I'll know when I stand up." Now, don't get too concerned this morning. I do know how I'm going to begin my little talk with you. Not so sure I'm going to end it, but we will end it, and we will end it on time. Notice that the clock is facing me and not you, so you don't have to worry about time, right? That's my concern. I did actually write a few notes while I was up here, realizing that I wanted to be true to the Sabbath hour. I wanted to be true to what we expect from church, to leave here uplifted, inspired, feeling drawn closer to the Lord, being fed for the week. Those are all cliches I grew up with, so they're easy to spiel off. But more than anything, I'm hoping that we can just, for a few moments, better understand why each one of us are here today, me standing and you sitting, and us together right here in this place, in this community, at this point in our lives. And I don't really care if you're 12 or 16 or 51 or 57 or younger or older. I just happen to use those ages because those are the ages of my family. It's because, and it's not just happenstance, it's because. And this morning I want to share with you a little bit about that because. I could have entitled my message, instead of the Clearlake Challenge, God loves the lowly, maybe I could have thought about a different title like No More We versus They. I want you to know that I have grown up, like some of you, an Adventist from birth. And I want you to know that I consider that a real privilege. It's an honor. It's a blessing. For some, they may see it as a curse. I see it as a responsibility. I see it as a God-given calling to share with those not so much about being a Seventh-day Adventist, but about being a child of God, here to serve other children of God. And I want you to also understand, before we get any deeper, that I was raised by a dad who happened to be a Seventh-day Adventist minister, living in New York City and serving there as a pastor for 47 years. He retired well into his 70s. And now at 93, still alive in Orlando, we just returned from a family vacation where some of you know the name Mark Finley. Some of you may not know his sister, Dale Slongwhite. She wrote a book on my dad's life, and it was just published. And we had the opportunity to read it. And here is the one line in the back of the book that states my dad's case. What makes the story of Arturo Santos so powerful is that it's about a great story about a great man who never tried to be great. It's a powerful story about a life that never sought power. And as I reflect on my dad's life, it's absolutely true. There was no I in my dad's name. And he gave up his life virtually at a point where I was only 3 months old. And he was in a park in the South Bronx. Now, I want you to think of the worst neighborhood that you know of and multiply that by 10. This is the South Bronx, Fort Apache. This is where you don't get out alive most of the time. And my dad was in a park with his 25 children, 7th and 8th graders. He was a teacher and a pastor, his very first year of working for the Adventist church. And there they were in the park playing, and a gang of about 12, 17, and 18-year-olds surrounded those kids and were trying to, what we use, the vernacular in New York City, jump them. They were mugging them. They were robbing them. They were taking whatever they could, pencils and dimes and pennies. In some cases, the shirt off their back or their coat. And in this one instance, my dad picks up the baseball bat that's sitting on the floor next to him in an attempt to maybe scare or strike some fear in these 12 gangsters. And instead, they took the bat from his hands and beat him over the head with it and left him for dead. They cracked his skull open, blood gushing, and moments to get to the hospital or he would be dead. And miraculously, he lived and was able to continue serving without any fear, without any trepidation, because he knew God would lead him and continue to lead him, even if his life was at stake and it meant sacrificing it for the next 40-some years in New York City. And so the book is about my dad's life, but as you read it, And as I contemplate it, I have to think that he was not concerned about his life. The book may have been about his life, but it was really about his life, about the life that Christ had lived and sacrificed on his behalf, on our behalf, and what that meant and what that required of him. And today, I have lived my life from New York to Michigan, back to New York, to California, to Texas, to Florida, back to California. I know. My wife says, when asked how many times you've moved, she can't count anymore. But I can tell you that we've been here now going on 5 years. And each of those years have meant a deeper and deeper contemplation of what it means to be here right now. And so I want to invite you, in an effort to describe what that means, to a passage in 1st and 2nd Samuel 16. And I would like to begin by sharing with you that I have told this story before, so forgive me, Jeff, for hearing it again, but this story is one of the most powerful stories in Scripture. It's about the prophet Samuel, who was on his way to crown a new king, to anoint David. And he had been so proud of the king that now God was about to remove. For King Saul was a big, powerful man. He was impressive. But he was disobedient. He had been disobedient to God. He had fallen from his responsibility as king. And now Samuel, not knowing who God has in mind, is on this mission to this high hilltop village where God had directed him. And he had just finished meeting with the leaders of the town. And Samuel was then led to the house of Jesse. And most of you know the story. There he was in the house of Jesse at the invitation of the leaders of the community, and he was looking for the new king, not knowing who it was that he was going to encounter. But he knew that Jesse had 8 sons. So surely one of them was going to be the king. And when he was introduced to the first son, he was amazed. Samuel looked into those big burly eyes, muscle-bound, strong. Oh, this had to be the king. Oh, yes. I mean, his hands, they were already reaching for that oil. He was ready to anoint him. Eliab, the new king of Israel. But no, God immediately spoke to Samuel's heart. Not the one, Samuel. Next, Jesse, do you have any more sons? Oh, yes, I've got more, but what's wrong with this one? No, Jesse, do you have more sons? And then came son number 2. No, Jesse, do you have any more? Son number 3, son number 4, son number 6. Now Samuel's getting tired, and so is Jesse. But Jesse, do you have any more? Just one more, Jesse. Jesse looked at Samuel and, you know, Samuel, there is one more. But he's out in the field. He's tending to the sheep. He's the youngest. He can't be the one you want. Bring him to me, Jesse. And sure enough, in walked spry, bright-eyed, thin, quick, poet-like David. And immediately God spoke to his heart. This is the one. Anoint him now, and crown him king of Israel. And that moment was a crowning moment in the history of Israel. And for God, in verse 7, spoke to Samuel and said, "But do not look at his appearance or at his physical stature, because I have refused him. For the Lord does not see," here it is, "the Lord does not see what man sees. For man looketh at the outward appearance." The true King James Version says, "Man looketh on the eyes. But Lord, God, he looketh at" what? The heart. Don't we do it? We do it. We look at the outward appearance. We look at the diploma. We look at the degree. We look at the title. We look at the money. We look at the ease, the comfort. We look at what man looks at, the outward appearance. But God, he looketh on the heart. And David was a man after God's own heart. The amazing part of this message is that the heart can see what the mind will not. And when you stop and ponder that concept, it's very hard. It's very hard to internalize. The mind cannot see what the heart can. It's only a divine concept. And your heart has to be connected to his in order to grasp it, in order to comprehend it, in order to fully understand what it means to be connected to God's own heart. You must first know who God is. In order to know who God is, you must understand his heart. And God reveals himself to us. And he directs us, but only if our heart is connected to his. I just want to tell you that when I fully engage with God, it's not my mind, but it's my heart that sees him. And when we see what God wants to show us, it changes our heart. And that's why the Bible talks about a new heart. That's why David understood what it meant to be king. David was not perfect. And I want you to know that neither am I, just in case anyone's wondering. My family knows that. But I just want you to understand that what made David so great was his desire to be a man after God's own heart. He talks about it in Psalms 51. "Have mercy upon me, O God, according to your loving kindness, according to the multitude of your tender mercies. Blot out my transgressions." That's a man after God's own heart. "Wash me thoroughly from my iniquity." That's a man after God's own heart. "And cleanse me from my sin." That's a man after God's own heart. "For I acknowledge my transgressions, and my sin is always before me. Against you, and you only, have I sinned, and done this evil in your sight, that you may be found just when you speak, and blameless when you judge." This is a man after God's own heart. I want you to know that as a leader in Adventist health, I have come to realize that if I am not a man after God's own heart, regardless of my imperfections, I cannot lead. I cannot be true to God's calling. And you, just like you are a leader. You are called to lead. If we're called to follow, then we are called to lead. Because God expects us not just to follow him, but to lead others to the foot of the cross. And in order for us to do that, we must first be connected to his own heart. And then here's what happens. What happens is, when we're called to lead, we realize that the privilege of being one of his children is a blessing that we must share. And if we don't, we will be untrue, and we will be spit out. So here is our calling in Clearlake. The calling is to love the unlovable. To love the unlovable? Are you kidding me? How can you do that? I want to share with you a story. Before I do that, I want to share with you that yesterday we had a 6-hour training class with Gallup. You ever heard of Gallup? You know, Gallup polls? They predict a new president. And they also have a research arm, and it focuses on healthcare and how to be a better organization. And Jeff and I were there together yesterday for 6 hours. And one of the speakers, after listening to him for a couple of hours, I came to realize this guy is not just any speaker. There's something about him. I said, "Do you always preach like this?" I asked him in front of everyone. And he looked at me and said, "Oh, so I guess you can tell, right? I'm seminary trained." He used a term that I wrote down. The term is the care of Christ. I never heard that term before. The care of Christ. And when I thought about it, it made me think back to a year ago. I was asked, among other Adventist health leaders, to write down what 1 year from now I was hoping to have accomplished as a leader at St. Helena Hospital, Clearlake. And we wrote down, all 50 of us wrote our thoughts down on a piece of paper, and then we put them in an envelope. You know, we addressed it to ourselves. And then a year later, I totally forgot that this was coming back to me. And here's what I wrote. 1 year from now, St. Helena Hospital, Clearlake, will be well on its way to fulfilling its vision to vitality. We will be a stronger health system, serving more of Lake County, sharing our vision more abundantly, keeping true to our calling by loving the unlovable more fully. A little later last year, it was July, we were in a Adventist health retreat, leadership retreat, and we did another little exercise. But this time we wrote down on parchment paper and put it inside our Bible, and I forgot it was there. But I just opened my Bible to a page this morning that I forgot it was there. It was buried inside 2 pieces of parchment. Parchment buried inside of 2 pieces of parchment. I want to be a gift of unconditional love to my wife and children. I also want to be an inspiration to them and all I encounter at work. I want to reflect God's character in all I do. This is what I want to do. But you know, like King David, I really fail. And I fall. And like King David, I want to ask for forgiveness. Not just to my family, but to my God. Not just to my God, but to my community. I want you to know that loving the unlovable is not easy to do. I don't know how many of you think it's easy, but it's not easy. And the first thing we must do, I believe, is not think of loving the unlovable as we versus they. Me versus you. But first of all, let's just get clear about something. We are all unlovable. But God loved us none the same. So when it comes to the foot of the cross, to mix metaphors, we're all in the same boat. In God's eyes, no one looks better than the other. No one is higher and no one is lower. So to say the Clearlake Challenge is to love the lowly is almost a misnomer. What I want to share with you today is that loving the unlovable is our calling. More than anything else. Do not think that we are being true to our calling if we are not doing everything possible to reach those who are less fortunate than us. Because that's why we're here. So let me share with you Gary Folker. I don't know if any of you ever heard of Gary Folker. I hope not, because I'm going to talk about him today. And Gary Folker was a man who was standing by the side of his car weeping. And I could tell you that I could smell him before I could see him. He was weeping by his car, parked next to the St. Helena Napa Valley Emergency Department, while I was walking with my suit, shirt, and tie, concerned that I was late to Sabbath school. Well, that morning, I was going to be later. I walked by Gary, realizing that as I walked by him, that I was not being true to my calling. So I quickly, as the Lord was speaking to me, spun around, walked back, not knowing what I was about to encounter. But I decided I had to get up close and personal with Gary in order for me to be able to be a blessing that moment. And as I did, I just asked a simple question. Gary, I didn't know his name. Sir, is there anything I can do to help you? He looked up, amazed. And I was more amazed when he said to me, Sir, you can help me if you can. I'm not sure if you can. But if you can, my wife, my common-law wife, is in that ED. I'm not sure if she's going to make it out alive. So, well, tell me more. And he began to tell me the story of how 8 hours earlier, he entered the St. Helena Hospital Clearlake ED. And after waiting in our ED for over 2 hours, while he watched his wife, just struggle to hold on, that it dawned on him that there was another St. Helena, Napa Valley ED, and he had heard it being promoted as the no-wait ED. And after 2 hours of waiting, he decided that he could wait no longer. He put his wife in the car and raced to St. Helena, Napa Valley, and they immediately took her in. And he went on to tell me, using a few expletives that I can't mention today, what he thought about St. Helena Hospital Clearlake ED. And how could there be two hospitals with the same name, one where you've got to wait 6 hours or more, because he told me that there was someone else waiting next to him who had been already there waiting 6 hours, so he wasn't going to wait another minute, right? He was on his way to St. Helena Napa Valley. Why would you even put your name on that hospital? Adventist. I got to tell you, there's no way he knew who he was talking to. But I got to tell you, the Lord planted him there to talk to me that day. And as I thought about what he had to say, it broke my heart. We talked for another 15, 20 minutes. At the end of our conversation, he reached out to hug me. And I want you to know that I did think about 2 seconds. But that's all it took me, 2 seconds. Maybe 1.5 seconds. And I knew that I only needed to hug him, but I needed to hug him tight. I not only needed to hug him and hug him tight, but I needed to get his name, his telephone number, and his wife's medical record. I needed to call him a year later and tell him about our new ED. But it wasn't just about our new ED that I needed to tell him about. I needed to tell him about the new vision that God had given me and the vision that we had cast because of my encounter with him. And Jeff, you don't know about this one. But that's why we created our Vision to Vitality. Our Vision to Vitality is not just about culture and quality, growth, community health. And I want you to know that that is so important to us as a hospital today. We are not a hospital system. We're not even a healthcare system anymore. We're a health system. And as a health system, our role, our responsibility is to improve the health of the community, not just take care of the sick. And when you talk about improving the health of the community, you're not just talking about physical and mental and emotional, but you're talking about spiritual. And so today, my time is running short. I'm just going to say this because if I don't say it right now, I'll probably forget it. First of all, anyone who wants to see our vision to vitality and understand why this vision comes from the heart and not just the head, you're welcome to get a copy. I'll leave them here. But today, I dropped in the offering plate my contribution to this church. And I'm going to ask our hospital to match it. And we're going to do it at least 3 times a year. And if you can convince me that we need to do it more, like every month, we'll be happy to do it. But we want you to take that small pot of money and allow God to multiply it for the good of this community. Think local. One of our cornerstones to our vision to vitality is leading by the example. Leading by example. The other is breaking the cycle of poverty and poor health in Clearlake. And the other is keeping our patients home. Keeping our patients home. Because when you have a loved one in the hospital, do you want to travel 50 miles to see them? Or do you want to travel 5 blocks? So to whatever ability we can as a critical access hospital, we want to keep our patients home where their loved ones can see them and where we can give them the best possible care. Now, like individuals who are far from perfect, our hospital is far from perfect. But like individuals who want to connect their heart and who want to have hearts after God's own heart, we as an organization want to do the same. Which means we have to begin with our own. We have to begin with our own team. And so the first thing we want to do is meet their physical needs. I mean, that's what the Little Red Book says, doesn't it? To win the confidence of the people, you must first meet their needs. And it's not about their spiritual needs. It's about their emotional, their physical needs. And with our own staff and family, we are giving them the opportunity to be vibrant again. The vision to vitality begins with them. So we opened up our own gym, and we hired our own fitness and health coach. And we just, Monday, are launching our first weight loss challenge. 85 employees have signed. It was only 320 employees. And I can tell you that another 50 wanted to sign up, but our communication just wasn't perfect enough. And they were pouring in at the last minute. So we're going to do another one, and maybe we'll have another 80. Let the first 80 inspire the next 80. And then we want to address their emotional concerns, and then their spiritual concerns. And we don't know where this is all going to go. It's just happening as I speak. But I can tell you that our vision to vitality has been born, and born of a desire to serve this community like our hospital never has before. And when I talk about health, I talk about physical, mental, and spiritual healing. And so our Live Well program now needs to take it to the next notch and above. We need to find a way to reach this community like never before, because I believe that program can do it like never before. It is constituted to do so. In closing, I would like to kind of come full circle. We, the hospital, you, the church, us, we are called to a mission together. And I hope and pray that as our hearts connect with yours and to God's, we will find that the impossible is very possible. We are the poorest county in California. Until recently, the most unhealthy county. We've moved up 2 notches. Maybe that Sue had something to do with that. We moved up 2 notches. And I want you to know that we've got at least 20 to go. So there's lots of opportunity. And at the end of the day, God will bless us because we respond to his call. Love the unlovable.